everybody. This is a 4-minute Bible study. Yes, I have changed the name because I simply can't do one of these within a 3-minute time period. Now, today we're going to be looking at the question of canon. And what we want to do is answer two questions. One, how did we get the books of the New Testament that we have? And two, why were those books chosen as opposed to maybe some other books that were floating around during that time period? Now, let's just begin with a couple of things right off the bat. First thing, the books that we have in the New Testament, all 27 of them, are the oldest books that we have from the early Christian church. And because of that, they are probably the most reliable as far as defining Christian doctrine and early Christian history. Most of them were written between the 50s AD and the 90s AD. An idea. And the closer they are to the events, the more reliable these documents can be because there are people around that can refute the events that are recorded there. The second thing, there's a misconception that the way the New Testament was put together is that in 325, Council of Nicaea, Constantine comes and calls all the bishops together and says, we need a Bible. We need something to define Christian doctrine for the Roman Empire, so put something together. That is an oversimplification of what happened at the Council of Nicaea, and it ignores the fact that there are many books of the Bible. Most of the New Testament books were already considered authoritative or considered scripture even before that. For example, Polycarp, he's got 16 books that he considers scripture that we know of that he just mentions. Ignatius, Irenaeus, all of these people acknowledge most of the books, and these lived in the late first, early second century. In addition to that, there was a canon or a list of books that was created in the late second century. And it included, again, most of the New Testament books we have, not any of the other ones that have been rejected. The other thing I want us to recognize, and I like the way D.A. Carson says this, he basically says, one of the things we need to know is that the church did not authorize the New Testament books. They recognized the New Testament books. So when we go into this and we're looking at, why were certain books chosen, one of the things we need to understand is that the church was just simply trying to recognize what books were authoritative and already considered scripture. And they did that by asking themselves 4 questions. First, was the book written by an apostle or a close associate? The apostles were the ones that Jesus authorized and empowered to be able to teach the early church, and it was those teachings upon which the early church was built. Now, some books like Mark, Luke, Acts don't have an apostle's name directly on them. So, for example, Mark was written from Peter's perspective and under the authority of Peter, so it would be considered apostolic. In addition to that, the other question was asked, is this book widely accepted and widely circulated? Okay, you don't want a book from Podunk Asia Minor that nobody has seen, nobody has hardly read, to be included in the canon just because someone says, hey, this is authoritative and it is scripture. It was written by Paul. It's got his name on it. There was a lot of that going around at the time, by the way. I mean, you've recently probably heard things about the Gospel of Thomas. Back in the day, there was the Gospel of Mary and Peter. Everybody had a gospel. You got the Epistle of Barnabas, 1st, 2nd Clement. All these were around in the third, maybe in the late second, 3rd century, but they weren't included because they didn't have the pedigree of the books that we have in the New Testament today. So if you just had some random book somewhere, it would not be included. It had to be widely circulated, widely accepted by the church. The third thing, did the book agree with known and accepted Christian doctrine? And you say, Sam, weren't these books the things that define Christian doctrine? To some extent, yes, but the early church also had preachers, like Paul went around and stuff like that, and he taught. And because of that, they began to develop creeds that help to solidify and help people learn what early Christians should believe and how they should live. Paul even quotes some of these creeds. So these creeds would carry on and help to define Christian doctrine as well. They weren't just something invented in the 2nd and 3rd century. Lastly, do the books elevate the moral and the spiritual values of the church? And if books did all of those things, they were included in the New Testament canon. I hope this helps you. One guy you can read, there's a couple. Daniel Wallace does a lot of textual criticism stuff in a positive way. You also have Michael Kruger, who's done a lot of work on this. So look those guys up on the internet. They'll help you with some of the questions that may be raised by some skeptics on the Canon of the New Testament.